Ken Cedeno. Thank you, Ken, for being
All
here.
right. Thank you very much for everybody for being here. Um, let's see, where is, thought I had it right here. Oh, here we go. Okay. So I actually made my way out. I wanted to go out there in the beginning of the war, actually, when Wolfgang was out there and Alex Kent and a few of our other friends. And they kept calling me and saying, hey, come on out. And I really wanted to go, but I had a lot of things to do. And eventually I finally made it out there April 21st, and I was only out there for 1 month. And I would like to go back as well. But so we didn't have anything particular to concentrate on. We just went out there and asked around, checked with journalists nearby, checked with local people to find out what was going on, to see what was of interest besides the regular things that were going on. And so what we started out doing primarily was funerals and burials. This is right in Bucha.
And Ken, how many people are you traveling with?
I initially went there to meet up with Carol, and Paula Bronstein was traveling around with her as well for a little while, on and off. Alex Kent, and then Wolfgang and Svet, Jacqueline, who you've had on here already. But then when I got there, Svet and Alex Kent took off to go do some work in other places. And then Carol and I just end up hanging out and going around for a month. This is also in Bucha. This is in Bordianka. There's a lot of volunteer organizations that were putting together care packages, and there was a huge crowd outside this van picking up packages.
And Ken, are you going with an idea, I want to shoot this, or you're on an assignment? What gets you there?
I got out there because I really wanted to cover the war, cover this conflict, and get the information out to everybody. I mean, there's thousands of journalists, videographers, reporters getting the information out on what Putin was doing here, and I wanted to be a part of getting that out. And I do a lot of work with Reuters, UPI, and SIPA for the most part. And I had an agreement with UPI to go out there and cover it for about maybe a month, give or take.
Okay.
So this is an apartment building. You can see obviously the washroom, and a kitchen sink is hanging. This was an apartment building that was quite long, and the whole middle section was gone. And when I got there, they had cleaned up all of the debris from the building that had fallen. And I just thought it was two different apartment buildings with, a space in between, but it turned out that whole section in the middle was just completely gone. And this was one of the side walls from the exposed apartment building. So whenever there's an event like this, or 9/11, or anything that destroys cars that are stuck on the road, they have to get them out of the way, because emergency vehicles need to get by. People need to get by to just try to get on with their life as much as they can, in spite of what's going on. So this is a parking lot in Irpin, or in Bucha, that was used for just getting rid of the cars and getting them out of the way. And they actually filmed, there's a video that was filmed here. I can't remember the name of the song. It's the one that, Ukraine won the song for the, I'm trying to remember the contest. Anyway, skip that part.
Eurovision.
Eurovision, yeah, thank you. So obviously Ukraine won first place. It was a really good, very heartwarming song. And I really, it's pretty emotional when I hear it. Just a different view from the trees. Lots of burials and funerals.
So Ken, these descriptions down below are what you do when you send the images back home to?
Yeah, actually, I thought I had that turned off, but
but
it's no big deal. It's fine.
Don't know.
But yeah, these are the captions that I use to send these pictures to UPI.
Right. Okay.
And the second sentence usually has something to do with the story, but maybe not necessarily the photo, but what was going on at the time.
Right. So
they may not, if you go on to read the second sentence, it's not necessarily about this particular photo. So this is that infamous bridge crossing that Wolfgang was talking about. I had gotten there quite late, well after all the people had walked across. But yeah, this is, you can see where people had walked across to the other side. The Ukrainians had blown up this bridge so that the Russians wouldn't cross. But that also left a lot of people stranded in Irpin that needed to get out. So it was a struggle for a lot of people to get out. And it just took a lot of time.
So you had a drone with you?
Yeah, I did. Like 2 days before I left, 2 other photographers wanted a drone. I wanted a drone. So called it B&H. I ordered 3 drones. So I had to bring them over with me. And then I had some flak jacket and a helmet, first aid kits, masks for other people. I had a lot of stuff to carry over for other photographers. But yeah, the drone, it's my first time using it. Technically, you're supposed to have a license, but it wasn't really an issue in Ukraine.
And does B&H, just as an aside, does B&H or any of the camera shops give you guys a discount because you're going over there to cover the war, or that is the naive question?
I didn't bother asking, but I think maybe next time I will. I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah, I don't.
I did the guy that I bought my vest from and helmet. I told him that I had left it behind for my fixer because he didn't have one. So he has all my stuff. And I told him I wanted to buy a vest and helmet for him, and he's offered to let me buy it at cost.
Okay.
So when I go over there, I'll get him a new vest and I'll get mine back. But let me go back on this drone. I flew this drone right at the very beginning before it started because they're kind of noisy. I don't want to be interrupting, and I pulled it down and it just started shooting regular photos. But during this funeral or burial, there was another drone flown by, I think it was the city government or something, that they had, there was a conflict of what was going on with the amount of people who were dying. I didn't get the whole story, but the people here weren't very happy with this drone flying, not only because it was interrupting the burial service, but they were doing it for purposes to hinder what was really going on. And this is a statue of a famous Ukrainian poet, Taras Shevchenko, from the 1800s. This is in Boryanka. So this is Easter, and this priest was blessing everybody that came up, and everybody brought in these little baskets of for gifts fruit, bread, flowers, candles. And the people were very, very nice. They continually came up to us to hug us and thank us for being there, to telling the world our story and getting the truth out. And it was really very heartwarming. I mean, the emotions covering this war was all over the place. It was high and low. We met so many people, different situations. They invited us into their home, cooked us little bits of food, coffee. It was Easter week, so we did the I forgot what it's called. Shoot, it's on the tip of my tongue. Angelique, who's online here, she knows. We used to do it all the time for the Greek Easter. So anyway, people brought us into their home and they were celebrating that. So we would participate in the festivities and celebration. And that's Carol Guzzi's actually right there near the sun popping in there. So this is inside the church. We had soldiers and parishioners coming in to celebrate Easter. And these churches they're old, but they're beautiful. I mean, you know, they pale in comparison with churches in the States. They're just very unique. We've got tons of artwork and paintings. It's beautiful. This is in Boryanka. Normally you don't see soldiers walking around like this. It's just usually people going in and out of their apartments to go back and find out some of their belongings. But there was a prime minister, I can't remember the country, he was visiting the area and he wanted to go in and investigate and inspect the damage and talk about his experiences and what he found here and have his little say on the news. But so there was a lot of armed security forces in the area just to make sure that everything was safe. And we had gone up into one of the buildings overlooking the courtyard where he was just prior to him getting there. We wanted to go up and get some pictures. We didn't know what was going on. We thought Zelensky was coming because we didn't know, but we had hoped that it was going to be Zelensky, but because there was tons of security. There were a lot of these guys out there, just snipers ready to cover whatever. But it turned out to be a prime minister from another country.
Yeah. So Ken, in a situation like that, is the army perturbed that they have to take care of this dignitary coming through, or the upside is the promotion of it, the propaganda of it?
I don't think they were upset. There were two particular soldiers with high-powered rifles. I think they had 50 caliber guns. We were just talking to them for a while, and they just seemed fine. There weren't. I didn't suspect any kind of
Animosity.
them being animosity for being there, having to protect somebody else from another country.
Okay.
Yeah. This is another area where another building that was just destroyed in the beginning, in the middle. This is in Irpin. The first floor of this building was just all shops. I think this was a coffee shop that we had gone into, and there's a huge courtyard in the middle there, and those blue things it's part of a playground for kids.
Mm.
And that building across the street is where I shot that previous picture from. The courtyard was just on the other side of that big building. So this whole city block was completely destroyed. And so we just went cruising through the different homes there, documenting the destruction. And once in a while, we would see somebody coming in to clean up their house or go through their belongings and just try to bring it back to some normalcy. And it was sad. Some did. We didn't have Carol and I didn't have a translator at the time on this particular day. So we would just, it was a little bit of a struggle trying to talk to people and ask them what was going on. But then there's that universal language of emotion, inflection in their voice, or tears or smiles or hand gestures. And you can basically get a little bit of the right dialogue across. So this is one woman who, she was describing what she was doing when the bombs fell. I don't think she was actually at her house here. She was somewhere else where she had to duck. But it's hard to see, but on the left of the frame, there's a huge crater that it was probably 10 feet deep and 12 feet wide. And then just directly in front of her, you can see an open section that kind of goes down into a little cellar. And I mean, if she had to, or somebody had to, they can go down there and try to be protected from whatever is falling. But I took a peek inside that well. That whole wall that's on that side was bowed in about 2 feet. Yeah, about 2 feet. So if anybody was in that shelter, I don't know that it would have worked on this particular instance. So in the metro stations, there were hundreds of people in Kharkiv at the metro stations, and a lot of people had to just some people had tents, some people had just a sleeping bag and a mattress. Some didn't have any. On some of the metro stations, the cars would be there, so people would be sleeping in the cars as well. And those people who had the cars, they had a little more privacy. But a lot of people had cats. A lot of people had their dogs with them, which was, I was nice. I was impressed and happy to see that. I've been to hurricanes where people leave their dogs tied up, and you just come back after the hurricane's over and their dog is still tied up and just dead. And I see a lot of that in hurricanes in the South. And I don't know why people just up and leave their pets behind, but I was happy to see people here just very much taking care of their pets. And a little bit of therapy for kids. They're pretty traumatized. They don't really have a full grasp of everything that's going on. Some do, some don't, but obviously this is pretty good therapy for them. And I think it's probably even good therapy for the adults and parents to just look at this and just try to get maybe a smile on their face for a little while, watch the kids post their artwork up. This is inside the metro.
And it's all, I mean, they're always very neat, to the point that Wolfgang was making, whether it's a destruction of, here they're all living in the train station, but I know you have another shot of everything just lined up nice and neat and civilized.
Yeah, I think it's a must when you're in a situation like this, because if you didn't have any organization or cleanliness or, just keeping things scattered, it would be a mess down there. And then people would be all upset, emotions would go crazy and there would be fights. One of the metro stations we went down, some of these people thought that once we photographed down there, that the city would get bombed right afterwards. And they think it's because of the press, but it's just a coincidence because they were bombing the city anyway, just randomly. And then one guy was pretty drunk and belligerent and just not wanting any of the press down there. So we didn't bother with it. We didn't want to upset anybody down there. So we just left and went over to a different metro station.
So they're thinking that you guys are there and that the world knows that you're there, so they're not going to bomb while you're there.
Well, I think some people think that, once we take a picture and then transmit it, whether it's TV or stills, the following day or hours later, they get bombed or nearby. I don't think any of these metro stations really got hit hard. that I'm aware of. But they think that it's because of the press. But, we really didn't think it was that case. It's just a coincidence because the Russians were just bombing intermittently throughout the place. I was down in this, I don't know if it was this station or not, but ran into Paula Bronstein shooting, and then went to talk to her. And then she was covering this one family that had this nice little table set up, and they were cooking some potato soup. And they insisted that I have some, and I really didn't want to eat up the remaining little bit of food that they have. And they kept insisting. And so I thought, okay. So I had the soup, and it was like the best soup I've ever had. It was so good. I couldn't put it down. But people were so friendly. They were just, like I said before, they're hugging you, thanking you for being there. They're very, very nice people.
Yeah, that's the shot. So where are you standing on this shot, Ken?
Well, it's just like, well, I know in DC, I don't know whoever's on here, what other cities, like a lot of times there's an upper level, then you go down the escalator to the main platform. So this is shot from one of the upper levels. It had a viewing space. I mean, there were people in every nook and cranny that you can think of.
Yeah, even on this ledge on the left, I didn't see it before. I see it now. It's all lined up just so.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yep. They finally cleaned them up. I mean, I think I have a picture where the mayor comes in and talks. So at one point in this town, Riska they had just liberated this town, and they were taking the people out of there in vans and cars, and they would take them out of the van and check their security, check their IDs, make sure everything is on the up and up. And occasionally, there might be a Russian sympathizer that they were really keeping an eye out for. That's what they wanted to check IDs for. And then this is one guy that they suspected. They hauled him off to the side somewhere. I'm sure they questioned him. I don't know what happened to the guy, if he was let go or detained. It happened real quickly. And this is some of the people that are coming off they were transporting them in whatever vehicles they can. Like this is a big industrial truck. Sometimes it's a car, sometimes it's a little bus. This is a school, an elementary school, or I think is maybe 8th or 9th grade. I think this guy was the principal at the school, but he gave us a look around the school to witness the damages. So several schools had been hit by the Russians. I mean, they're just all over the place. And this is one of maybe 6 or 7 craters left. They're way behind there in the back, behind those trees. There's 4 more.
So how is it, Ken, in a shot like that the windows are not shattered, and in other shots they're all shattered?
Well, I guess that just depends on luck, really. Yeah, because you can see some of those windows that back there are fine, and then some of them directly above his head that's just blown away. I guess it's sheer luck. Yeah. So this is in like Wolfgang was saying, some of these apartment buildings are the old Soviet era, where it's just like a block of cement. There's no design factor whatsoever. There's this, just a little bit northeast of Kharkiv, still in Kharkiv, but on the edges of town, there's a whole bunch of apartment buildings. They had been hit pretty hard. And as he had said before, in other places, it happens all over the place, where people just don't want to leave, especially the elderly. They're set in their ways. They don't want to leave, whether it's, they just planted tomatoes or whatever it is. They just don't want to leave. So they don't. So this is a couple. Are you seeing the whole frame or not?
Yes. Yeah, we have the whole thing.
Because I'm getting cut off by the pictures of everybody. Anyway, so the guy on the right and the woman in the middle, they were just putting together their nice little lunch. And this guy came in and decided he'd hang up the Ukrainian flag.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing that, you know, in this situation, you need a tablecloth to make it so.
Well, it certainly helps the whole atmosphere because I mean,
Yeah.
it looks like a nice romantic little picnic
does.
cloth, like the, you know, the typical picnic thing. And you got a candle. Yeah, I mean, they make the best of what they have.
Yeah.
So a lot of these people, and we'll get into some other pictures of another woman, another babushka, who, like these people, probably they live maybe on the upper floors, but there's no electricity, so the elevators aren't running. They're old and elderly, so they can't really take the stairs as much as they could before. So they result. I mean, they end up having to just live in the basement, and these are like dirt floors, pipes going through. So this is Sasha. This is another apartment building. As you can see, just dirt floors. And he had, I think he had 6 kittens in that tent in the back. This is Ludmila with her cat Meow Meow. She was so sweet. She also lives in the basement of this building with Sasha, the other guy that was in the other photo. She lived on the 8th floor. She has bad knees. She never leaves. She never goes more than like 20 meters from the door of this apartment building to the basement, because the whole area, even while we were there, we could hear shelling going on nearby because we were pretty close to the Russian border at this time. Because like Kharkiv is like 40 kilometers to the Russian border, and then the Russians were well within that border, maybe halfway. So yeah, there definitely was a lot of shelling going on.
I mean, this is a really beautiful shot. I mean, you could see how beautiful this woman is. Her skin is so beautiful.
She was such a sweetheart. We cried when we had to say goodbye to her.
Wow, she is stunningly beautiful.
She was just the sweetest. People would come over and just donate food. So this is like just in front of her building.
Mm.
People were bringing flowers. So at one point while we were there, we heard some shelling going on pretty close. So we wanted to go investigate. We saw this big plume of smoke, and then just like Wolfgang had to do, you know, try to get somebody to let him into a building. I don't think we had to run into anybody to let us into a building. We just had to find a building that had a door that was open. And then we had to take the stairs all the way up. It was a bit of a hike, definitely got our steps in. But this was, I think somebody said it might have been a gas station. We're not really sure. So one of the things we, you know, when it was brought to my attention, you just think, oh yeah, of course, that makes sense. But, you know, city after city around the world, they all have a zoo or an eco park of some sort. So this was, this was the owner's house of Feldman Eco Park, which is on the northeastern part of Kharkiv. And the Russians, when they started shelling everywhere, a lot of these animals died, a lot of them. And so immediately staff and other volunteers, and I think the guy in the middle of the red shirt, I think he's a volunteer veteran. So they had a lot of people go in and volunteer. They had a lot of large turtles that the owner of the house was keeping them stored in a room next to the pool. Like he had an indoor pool. So there was maybe 15 of these turtles. So they had to put them in a wheelbarrow and then take them out to the van, and then load them up at the van. And they're going to take all these animals to Poltava. Is it in here? Yeah, Poltava. Sorry. Which is about 2 hours away. And I think there was another zoo up there that they were going to use to keep these animals safe for the time being. So pigs and boars were the other thing that they had to try to rescue. They just had to herd them like cattle into the back of a truck.
Wow.
So we would gone to this park a couple different days, and on this particular day, when we go to the park, we're going down this highway, and then you get off on this exit, you make a U-turn, and you come back. And just before we got to the park, on the right-hand side, there was a Ukrainian tank, and just sitting off the side of the highway. And after we made the U-turn, we came back into the Feldman Park. We, at that point, were just kind of right across the highway from this tank. And while we're filming this, I'm shooting this with my long lens, and I'm just panning this guy. I'm keeping my eye on this guy and the llama. And I didn't even know that this unexploded ordnance was there. I didn't notice it was there until like after I was editing the pictures. But it's a miracle that these guys didn't accidentally run into it. So while we were there, the tank had fired into the Russian territory, and what happens after that is they're going to retaliate. So they did, and well, they were getting a couple more ostriches into the back of the bus. So they retaliated, and at one point, it was very close to where we were, so we had to take shelter real quick into this this little shed right here on the left. So that's everybody running in for cover. So what ended up happening was, so we ended up going in here for about 15 seconds, 20 seconds, and then we felt like it was necessary for us to get to the van and get back into the rest of the park. We had broken off into two different groups. There was a group going in to rescue some of the animals, and then there was another group that we were following that was going to a different part of the park and another adjacent parking lot where we were to fix a truck to get the buffalo on, because one of the other set of animals that we were trying to rescue this day was the buffalo. And so just after we got the buffalo into a pen, some heavy shelling came really close, so we had to dive. And then after about 30 seconds, we figured it was okay to get up, and we're on our way back to the parking lot with this other group of ours. And we got the call that three of them had been hit and three of them were injured. So we ran up to the parking lot, we had to ditch again, and then back into the vans. And then we followed the other car that had the three injured. In the car, we followed them to the emergency room at the hospital. So there were two adults that got hit, and sadly there was a young kid who was only 15. He got hit the worst, and this is him. He had just coming out of the vehicle. He got hit severely. He didn't make it. He only lasted like another 20 minutes. It's really sad because he's 15 years old and he was an only child. And this is one of the other injured party. So while we were out there, just after we came out of the hospital, these military troops had come up with these two Russian soldiers. One of them was severely injured and they took him into the hospital. But we're trying to put two and two together, and we somehow thought perhaps that these guys were in cahoots with giving coordinates to the Russians where we were. But in reality, I think it was the Ukrainian tank that when it launched into Russia, they just retaliated to where we were, and we just happened to be in the proximity of the shelling. We didn't purposely go into any shelling situations to chase any of that, but war is everywhere, and sometimes it comes to you. So it turns out that these guys, the Ukrainian soldiers had just come across these guys who were either Russian soldiers or sympathizers. And so they were detaining this guy, and the other guy was severely wounded and was in the hospital.
So, I mean, in that little scenario there, Ken, it just by the luck of the draw, you're that young 15-year-old or anybody else.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they were part of our group, and you know, we were just separated by not very far because they were with a group that were trying to go fix the truck that we were going to use to get the buffalo out. So this is the mother and father of the child. They just got the news that he didn't make it, and so he was consoling her. But I didn't get the picture. I was doing something else, and she ended up being really upset at him and was hitting him because I think he had sort of allowed him to come out and volunteer with the kids, but so she was pretty upset. So back into the apartments in Kharkiv. No, this is Irpin, sorry. You know, you go into some of these apartment buildings and you just see, you know, like a bed, a couch or whatever. But then when you see like the parents' master bedroom and then the crib next to them, you know that they obviously had some kid there, and we just hope that they got out okay. They had, all these apartments had beautiful wallpaper. This is just outside of Kharkiv. The whole back area had just been hit recently. They didn't have time to clean it up. So they're just trying to get out with their dog. Whatever remaining things that they can have, they can bring out. And so this is some of the group that we were with and for the animal rescue in Eco Park. We came across an area where they were donating blood, so we all decided we'd donate. And that on the left, that's Dima, our fixer. We ended up having to leave pretty soon after this. I think only one of our guys got to donate a little bit of blood. Something, I can't remember what happened, but we decided we needed to go somewhere else real quick. So then we wanted to go over to the regular cemetery in Kharkiv. It's a very big cemetery. It's not the place. Most of the burials that we were covering were in Bucha and Irpin. But this guy and his girlfriend decided to come and visit his father, who had died, I think, just 3 days into the war. Yeah. This guy is a farmer. He owns this place, and he had about 80 different cows and pigs die in the attacks. And oddly enough, like, this cow must have just gotten so scared that it literally jumped through the window. That's where he ended up. So he had that whole building behind him was like, I think that was used for cows and pigs. Feeders, there's a lot of feeders in there. And Valtivka, where was this? Yeah, Vilhivka, just outside of Kharkiv on the east. There was a dead Russian soldier. Oh, and one of the Russians used drones to search for locations to hit. And I'm sure that, I'm sure the Ukrainians are doing the same thing. And so we didn't feel comfortable flying a drone too close to the Russian border or where the Russians are, because they evidently have the technology with the Chinese technology, because the Chinese make a lot of the parts for the DJI drones. And so the Russians have the technology to track the drones. And so whether it's a military drone or if it's a journalist flying a drone, they can track them and they know where they are. So we didn't want to be too close and have them track our drone. But at one point, I guess the crew that we were with felt it was okay. Just after this, I saw a drone up in the air and I thought, oh my God. So I immediately asked our crew if it was theirs, and they said it was. So I was relieved. But then we didn't spend much time here. We left soon after that.
So the Ukrainians, Ken, when they find the Russian body, do they do something with it? Because I assume at some point all the bodies get changed, traded back, right? I mean,
Yeah. There's a few pictures coming up where Malarahan was a small village outside of it's actually near where this one was. Oh, this is from Malarahan. They found some bodies and they dug them up, and I guess they returned them. But this is a ridge line, kind of out on the outskirts of Kharkiv. There's a roadway that goes into Kharkiv, and the Russians were up on that tree line, bunkered down. And you can see one of the turrets that fell off, and then the tank is right behind it. And I imagine these potholes are from Ukrainian bombing to try to get rid of the Russians. And sometimes damage in villages are not necessarily from the Russians, because the Russians will occupy the village and then the Ukrainians have to fight and attack the village to get the Russians out. So sometimes the damage is not necessarily from the Russians. So I was going to say one more thing on this. The Russians were using this as an artillery point where they were just right above the highway and they could just pick off vehicles that were going into Kharkiv. And this is in Malarahan. This is a bunker. I was just trying to make it look pretty. This is a Russian helicopter that crashed back in March. I think when it initially crashed, it was earlier on in the year and none of this grass had even been grown. It was like all a dirt field back at the time. And see where the Z is in white in that whole section to the right? That was all intact. It had the configuration number on it or whatever insignia. And that was all intact in the beginning when this helicopter crashed. And over the period of a few months or whatever, somebody had decided to take those insignia letters off for whatever reason. We don't know. And that's just a drone shot of the same thing.
Wow.
This is a turret from the tank, popped off. I didn't know that, Wolfgang, I didn't know that that's why they pop off so easily. So in this town of Malarahan, I was with this Spanish TV crew. We're in the backyard talking to this one guy, and out of nowhere, these two civilian guys come running back, and a military, I think he was with public PR. They came running back and they had gotten information that there was a Russian body buried in the backyard. So they dug that body up and then brought it out. And then they got word that there were two other ones. And so these are the two other bodies that they had just unburied. And, you know, when things like this happen in a civilian neighborhood, it brings out onlookers. And so these teenage kids and other people were just hanging around watching. I think it's a little graphic here. So these are Russian soldiers with their hands tied. And, you know, there was all this talk about how the Russians are tying the hands of some of the Ukrainian soldiers and torturing them, or, you know, rumors are always going out everywhere. But you never know. It could be the other way around too. And this is kind of proof, I guess, you know, the Ukrainians had tied these guys' hands up as well. And then they put them in bags and then put them in the ambulance and took them off, and they'll categorize them and try to get the bodies back to Russia, I guess.
Is that like a human element to this whole thing? Like still doing the right thing or the respectful thing? Even
I believe I believe that's true.
each other.
plus the military law that, I forgot the name of it, but where they,
Even convention?
yeah. So they try to keep things, within reason and, be a bit of a humanitarian. And this is a guy in the same neighborhood. He was just going over his experiences. He has a lot of canned fruit, bottled fruit. So we decided to go back into the metro and do a little bit more. And we just got lucky that the mayor of Kharkiv came down to talk to the people and just tell them what was going on. They're trying to basically get people cleared out of the metro, because at this point it was getting a little bit safer for people to go back home, if you had a home to go back to, or if you had to leave the metro, you have to find some place to go to. So he had a lot of statements to give to people, and they had a lot of questions for him as well, which makes sense. And I wanted to give a big shout out to the crew that I hung out with a lot during this time. This is in Malarahan. That section to the left is where they had dug up those 2 Russian bodies. But this is, on the left is Dima. He was our fixer and driver. And then Roger in the back with his cat. He was about to adopt that cat and take it home. He's with the Spanish TV crew. He's one of the reporters. And the guy in front is the videographer. And then the guy in the copper pants is a award-winning documentary photographer, filmmaker, Justin. And in the back is Max. He was the Spanish crew's driver. And then you've got Carol Guzzi, and then Nuri on the right. She was another reporter with the Spanish crew. But I just wanted to thank them very much, because they were like the best team to hang out with. We hung out with them for about 2 weeks, I think. We all stayed at the Park Hotel, and we all share information and become buds. And there's a lot of bonding between journalists when you're covering heavy stuff like this. Our hotel had people from Italy, France, Spain, Germany, Japan, lots of places. But it was great. There's a lot of camaraderie going on.
Yeah,
But
again, someone has a question. The dead bodies of Russian soldiers are stripped of clothing and shoes. Is this how the Russians leave them, or are the Ukrainians doing this?
Say it again.
It appeared that on a bunch of the photographs that the Russian soldiers were stripped of their clothes and shoes. Is this something that the Russians do when they leave them, or is that what the Ukrainians are doing?
I don't know. I never came across anything like that. These guys all had their clothes on.
Okay.
I don't know. I haven't heard that, or I haven't seen that either. That's it. I wanted to give my shout out to my peeps there for the big support, camaraderie.
And how long will you travel? How long will you travel with these folks, Kenny?
With these guys, it was about 2 weeks. We just made friends while we were at the hotel, because we all go down and sit down in the same place for dinner, and you end up talking to somebody next to you, and he's like, "Well, where are you guys going tomorrow? We've got this tip on this is happening," and it's like, "Okay, we're only 2 people. Do you mind if we come with you guys? You're a bigger crew, and we, safety in numbers." And so sometimes, like Dima, our driver, he had family in Kharkiv, so sometimes he'd go and spend time with them. And then Carol and I decided we wanted to go out, go do something, so we would go with the Spanish crew. On this particular day, Carol had stayed behind. She needed to get some rest, and then she caught up with us later after this. But yeah, there's a lot of bonding, and we share a lot of information for the most part. There's some organizations that don't want to give out any information. They want to keep things very exclusive.
Right. Is that your last slide, Kenny?
Yep.
Yep. So a question for both of you guys. What do you do when you come back home, to deal with your own stress and, all the things that you've seen? How how do you get back to just, going to a coffee shop and, waiting online and, someone giving you an attitude and all of a sudden here you are.
I didn't have any emotional problems. I often think about that. Like, am I bottling it up and keeping it in and not saying anything? I keep a check on my emotions a little bit. Am I getting too edgy? Am I jumping off the cliff at some stupid remark somebody makes? And I don't think I've come across any of that. I'm okay so far, I think. The only thing that I did notice is that there was a storm that came into DC, and the thunder and lightning. I used to never be bothered by thunder and lightning, and then all of a sudden, it was different this time. I mean,
All right.
it did bring back memories, because we got, I mean, that one close call was very, very close at the zoo, and then we had like 4 other ones where they were pretty close. So the thunder and lightning,
All of a sudden you heard it.
yeah, it's like, you do a belly flop off the high dive and you're very reluctant to go do it again.
Mm.
So that, Wolfgang, have you had any? You were out there for quite some time, much
Yeah.
longer than.
Yes, from the initial trip was like 4.5 months. So I think a lot of the harder days that I dealt with, I was with a good group of friends and colleagues, and I think that and then was fortunate enough in these events, like you get to work alongside people who have been doing this for years and decades and this is not their first rodeo. But got to like talk through everything that is on my chest or like weighing on me, like while there, I think. And then kind of the last like little bit that I was there, it was on the first trip, it was like a calm, like 2 weeks. So everything had for the most part been processed, but I did have quite a few similar things, not with like noise since I've been back, but from the amount of like fires after strikes, like you would have, Ukraine's flat for the most part. So you'll see these like smoke clouds coming from whatever had been hit along the horizon in different areas. And this was really prevalent in the first couple months of the war, like you'd see them all over. And when I came back, anytime that I live in Pennsylvania and Philadelphia, and it's like quite hilly in the area. So like driving through the city or like outside of the city, like you'd catch a little low cloud that's like very dark, and it's just like, wait, did shelling happen? Like was something dark over here? And then like have to be like, wait, I'm in Philadelphia. That certainly did not happen. But one day I was I saw this and I was explaining it to a friend that I was driving with. And we turned like a couple streets, and I'm just like, yeah, like this is like the world. Like, I don't know, like I just see this now and think like shelling happened, something's on fire. And then sure enough, there was like a massive fire like down the street. And I was like, this is just like life gaslighting me on what's happening now.
Mm. And so you live through these experiences and you're with other colleagues. Do you see sometimes, or are there signs when you recognize one of my colleagues is going too far or taking too many risks? How does that brotherhood sort of help each other in those situations? Because I assume at some point somebody must have a bad moment while you're there.
Yeah, I think whether it's like emotional, people are like more tense. Like we all had days where like I've snapped at colleagues and friends and like had to apologize for it later, just because like I had some buildup on not getting things out for a few days or hours or whatever, or in the instance that someone has a higher threshold for risk than other people in the group. I think you just sort of figure that out with who you're around, and you try and be around people that are more complementary to what you're accepting of. But I wanted to touch on whoever it was who had asked about John Benizhno. Sorry if I said your last name wrong. The bodies of the Russians. So whether it's civilians or Ukrainian soldiers that find them, they'll like root through the pockets, take like look for like any like ID, or if there's like ammo. The Ukrainian military takes, if there's ammunition around, they're stripping that. If there's like plates and like their plate carriers and armor, they're taking that. Like they don't really use the helmets. but anything that can be useful, they need supplies, so they're taking that. So that can sometimes explain why like shirts are opened and like pockets are like flipped inside out. And then the shoes, this was a major issue for the Russians, is how they were supplied coming in winter. Some of these bodies, like the last one that Ken showed us, was severely bloated. That body had been out there for weeks or like a month, maybe longer, just sitting in the sun and inflating. In the winter time, the Russians weren't equipped with proper winter gear. So there was widespread like looting of people's homes for winter shoes, or a lot of soldiers would be, the POW that I interacted with in Irpin had sneakers on that he had stolen. He was lamenting to the Ukrainian soldiers about how this is bullshit. He wasn't given what he needs, and was like kind of just saying all the things that like we've kind of seen in text messages and whatnot on Russian supplies not being adequate for the situation. So it could very well have been that he was I don't know the situation too. Sometimes like when you're just like hanging out in a trench, you're not wearing your combat boots all day, you might just be wearing slippers, and then the events unfold while you're not completely prepared for them. So it could be any number of things. I don't know necessarily. Maybe sometimes they do just get stripped and whatever, for whatever unfortunate reasons that we would like to not think are happening, but that entirely does. But then there are also like practical reasons for why that's happening.
Yeah. Also insignias, I think there are certain insignias that certain special, for lack of a better word, maybe special forces or whatever of the Russians, they have certain insignias that designate that they're maybe a sharpshooter. So if they come across these Russian bodies, they also look for those insignias so they can identify, okay, we know what kind of people were over here. They're not just regular soldiers. They might be special, whatever, special ops, something like that.
So if like, can you shed a little light on your experiences with the local people, with the Ukrainians, as far as, their morale, their spirit, that type of thing?
For us, we stayed at this really nice hotel in Kyiv, and then in Kharkiv, we stayed at the Park Hotel. That hotel was a lot of the people, not I'd say there's a good handful maybe of some of the staff at that hotel were living in the hotel in the regular meeting rooms that they had to be like changed into a place to stay, throwing in an extra cot or a mattress for them to sleep on. For whatever reason, some of their homes were either destroyed or, I don't know, for whatever reason, they had to leave their home and stay in the hotel. And so some of these people had their kids with them working, and their parents working at the hotel. And they were just the best people. They were very supportive. They would bend over backwards to help you, give you a little extra food. They're very, very nice people. And they were, I'm still in touch with some of them at the Park Hotel, checking in on them and making sure that everything's okay. But they'll tell me like, we're still getting shelled a lot more than when we were there.
Okay, great. And if anyone else has any questions, you can put them into the chat room. But I have to say, everyone is so appreciative of both of you for shedding this light and giving us some insight into what's going on, and admiring your courage and your work, and on and on and on. So I can't thank you enough. Wolfgang, do you have a closing comment?
I'll just answer that last question that you had about the people in Ukraine in closing.
Okay.
Like, I think that in my time there, like, it started out, and I think that anyone here from like the Upper East Coast and the Rust Belt would feel like very at home quickly with like when you first interact with Ukrainians, and I think Slavs in general have like this very like cold, suspicious, seemingly like aggressive demeanor at first. And like, if you're from New York or you're from Philly, it's just like, these are like the Irish and Italians that I know. And it's very much like that, but like within moments of like interacting with someone, they are so hospitable and so inviting, and like will what Ken was talking about with this, like I had the best soup of my life, like dozens of times while in Ukraine, like whether it's borscht or the potato or the pea soups or like salo or whatever it is that people are cooking, like the home cooked meals and like the invitations to share like what little someone has left is just like the most heartwarming, inviting. Some of the best moments I've had in life have been there. And there's also like this underlying, but I touched on it earlier, like the unity and like the persistence in that country to strive to not only beat Russia, but be something better, since we're at a very special moment in history for this country where it's not just like today, it's kind of been like writing history since 90s, like when Ukraine in this era became its own sovereign nation. I know that it's much older than Russia and it's been around since pre-Viking times, but in the past, since the wall fell, they've been striving to make their own national identity. And I feel how we're looking at it now is like, this is more of kind of the final act of like their revolution and like their independence and like severing the tie from Russia and not just moving westward, but becoming Ukraine as like its own thing, its own completely like independent nation state. And although that's all on paper, I think that it's really a fascinating thing to see the development of that and them forming their own identity that'll be separate from the West and it'll be separate from Russia. And it's really awe-inspiring. And I think that it's gonna be amazing to watch this unfold in the coming years and decades and see where Ukraine is at once this is all over, and hopefully soon.
Can I give you the last word?
No, I feel the same. I'm just incredibly thankful to the Ukrainian people for being so hospitable to having us in their backyard so constantly. And, you know, we all hope that this ends soon. It's just a sad moment. It's very sad that that the Ukrainians are being treated this way. But we hope it all ends soon.
Well, and I really have to echo those words, because I have very dear friends who are Ukrainian and who are watching tonight. And my dear friend told me I better mention how wonderful the Ukrainian families are that I know. So without getting myself in trouble, I can only echo those words. The people that I know that are Ukrainian are the salt of the earth, and they very much are part of the motivation to keep doing these weeks of having folks like you guys coming in and showing us what's going on, so we don't forget, and letting the voices be heard. So again, I really appreciate you guys doing this. You have a standing offer when you come back and have new work and new vision. Let me know. I want to have you back, and if there's anything you guys want to promote from any standpoint, there's always a platform for you guys to present, because we've had people come on 2 and 3 different times. So again, I can't really thank you guys enough for being here. And tomorrow night is our final night of this week with Carol Guzzi, who I'm sure will be equally as inspiring. And thank you guys very much.